Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, The Modern Internal Auditor, from Inspector to Systems Thinker. I'm Mike Richmond, your host for Exemplar Global's online expo, focused on the current state of conformity assessment. This session is presented by Kelly Rusbatch, an ISO compliance and business consultant who is the founder of Adaptable Quality. She is passionate about the strategic application of ISO management system standards, and she's also a strong proponent of the development of human-centric systems that are practical and support people, culture, and long-term business growth. In this presentation, Kelly offers a look at the evolving approaches to the internal auditing function. So Kelly, take it away.
Thank you, Mike, and the team at Exemplar Global for inviting me back to your Expo series for 2026. It is my absolute pleasure to present today on the modern internal auditor and the shift from inspector to systems thinker. Who I am and why this matters. I am Kelly Rusbatch. I am a consultant for Adaptable Quality. And firstly, what is a systems thinker? A systems thinker is someone who understands that outcomes are not created by isolated events or individual actions alone, but by interactions between parts of a system over time. Instead of focusing on what went wrong here, a systems thinker asks, what is connected to what? What patterns are repeating? What pressures is the system creating? And why does this outcome keep appearing even when people are changing? In short, a systems thinker sees the structure behind behavior, not just the behavior itself. So, a systems thinker is someone who looks at a whole system, not just parts. Focuses on relationships and interactions and not just isolated events. Seeks to find patterns over time and not one-off incidents. And understands that structure drives behavior. So it works to improve system conditions, not just fix one individual problem. In auditing terms, a systems thinker doesn't just ask, was the requirement met? They ask, what in the system makes this outcome likely or inevitable? Nothing happens in isolation. In organizations, every process touches another. People to processes, departments to departments, decisions to behaviors, policies, and then real world workarounds. So a delay in one area often creates a failure somewhere else. So the key idea here is you can't understand a problem without understanding the connections. And behavior is shaped by system structure. One of the most important ideas in systems thinking, the structure of a system produces its own behavior. Not personality, not effort, not intention. For example, if approvals are slow, people bypass them. If a workload is excessive, shortcuts start to appear. If metrics are based on speed, then the quality starts to drop. If reporting is very complex, data starts to become very inaccurate. And people adapt to the systems, even dysfunctional ones. So patterns are more important than the event. So one overdue action or one mistake or one auditing find, a pattern is repeated over time. So overdue actions every audit cycle, repeated non-conformities in one same area, chronic delays across teams. As an internal auditor and a systems thinker, you need to escalate from what happened to what keeps happening. Patterns are the thing that's going to reveal the system behavior. Individual events don't. So systems are then held together by feedback information. So that reinforces or corrects the behavior. So reinforcing loops can amplify poor performance and less attention, worse performance. Good performance leads to recognition and more improvement. It makes sense. Balancing loops stabilize things. So errors, correction, improvement, risk, control, reduction. In real organizations, those feedback loops, when they become weak, start to create drift into something like mediocrity. So strong feedback loops create continuous improvement. So if feedback is delayed or ignored, the system starts to lose control of itself. So systems produce the results they are designed or allowed to produce. So Deming said every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. If results are inconsistent, poor, repeatedly failing, the system's not broken. It's functioning as it's designed to, or it's functioning as it's tolerated. If you don't change the system, your results will not change. Here's a story of the most important things about systems thinking. I've worked across industries from board member to compliance manager to scientist, business owner, consultant, and if there's one role I value the most, it's this one. Walking into a business with no skin in the game, no internal politics to protect, no history to defend, and no relationships to preserve or worry about promotion or survival in a certain business. My responsibility is to do one thing well, which is to think clearly. As an internal auditor, I want to observe deeply and I want to tell the truth about what a system is actually doing and not what people hope it is doing. Because internal auditing at its best is not inspection, it's a system diagnosis, and systems, as I mentioned before, they don't lie. People can explain them, policies can describe them, but the systems will reveal themselves through their outcomes. So that's the key idea I want to explore today, that most organizations don't fail because they don't care. They're failing because the systems are quietly training people to accept being mediocre. And mediocrity, once it's accepted, does something very dangerous. It starts to reproduce itself. So I'm going to share a secret. Secret 1. Every system is perfectly designed to produce its current results. As I said, this idea stems from Deming. And it is one of the most uncomfortable truths in auditing. If you are seeing repeated overdue actions, recurring non-conformances, same issue, different year, findings, then you're not looking at a random failure, you're looking at a system design. It's not written design, but actual design. Because every system is perfectly structured, not for excellence, but for whatever it is consistently producing. And this is where auditors sometimes find they get a bit trapped, because we treat symptoms as exceptions. But systems thinkers treat symptoms as outputs. So instead of thinking, who didn't do their job? We start asking each other, what is it about this system that makes this outcome normal? And I think that shift is everything, because once a problem becomes normal, it stops being treated as a problem. It becomes culture. And culture is just repetition that nobody challenged. Mediocrity is contagious, but so is excellence. And there is a phrase I've seen proven in every industry: misery loves company. But in systems thinking, it shows up a little differently. Low standards don't stay isolated, they start to spread. They are quiet, but they are consistently predictable. If one team starts to cut a corner, and nothing happens, other teams start to notice. If one department routinely delays actions and still passes their audit, other teams learn. If it's good enough and that becomes accepted once, it starts to become expected everywhere else. And it's something that's called normalization of deviance. A term that's used in safety critical industries like aviation and engineering. NASA studied this after the Challenger disaster. Small accepted deviations became normal until failure became inevitable. Now, the other side, excellence, is also contagious. When one team starts to lift their game, lift their performance standards, they start documenting clearly, they close their actions properly, they start to think critically, others start noticing too. Systems then mirror behavior. So the real question for any internal auditor or leader becomes, what behavior is this system currently rewarding? Because whatever gets rewarded gets repeated, and whatever gets repeated starts to become the system. Internal audits need to focus on both events and systems. Secret number 3. Traditional auditing often focuses on events. Was the form completed? Was the checklist signed? Was the training recorded? But systems thinking asks something a little deeper. What interactions caused this outcome? In Peter Senger's 5th discipline, it describes systems as patterns of relationships, not just isolated parts. I like that. And in ISO 19011 auditing guidance, that it also increasingly reflects this shift from just going from a checklist verification towards risk-based thinking, context understanding, and system interaction. So instead of, is the record complete, we want to ask more, why does this process depend on this documentation to function safely? Or instead of why, was the corrective action closed? We might want to ask, why does the closure take 3 months and 5 reminders to be closed? Because if you audit just the events, you'll always miss causality. So if you miss causality, you end up just managing a whole bunch of noise instead of managing and improving in systems. The system always tells you what it values. Secret number 4. Every organization has 2 versions of reality. The official version, policies, procedures, values, statements, and the real version, what actually gets rewarded, what gets tolerated, what gets ignored. And as auditors, we see the gaps. We see this gap constantly. So, for example, we value risk management, but you might see some risks that are routinely being accepted without being escalated. You might see someone saying, oh yes, we prioritize safety, but then over here we're seeing some shortcuts that are being rewarded because they're speedy and fast. And then we expect accountability, but we've got a whole lot of overdue actions, and it's quietly being normalized in just how things get done. So the key insight here is a system's true value is revealed by its tolerance for deviation. If poor performance is repeatedly tolerated, the system is not failing, it's teaching. And what it teaches is this is acceptable, and this is where mediocrity becomes structural. So it's not because people choose it, but it's because the system is allowing it to happen over time, and over time, allowance becomes the expectation. Secret 5. Your most powerful internal auditing tool is a question. If there is one shift that can transform an internal auditor into a systems thinker, it's this. Stop collecting answers. Start designing questions that reveal thinking. So because a systems thinking is not about just knowing more, it's about seeing things differently. High impact internal auditors can consistently ask, What would happen if this step was removed? Where does this process rely on some hero behavior for it to be effective? Where do people have to work around the system just to get the work done? What would break if no one intervened in this system at this time, in this moment? And why does this issue keep returning, but in different forms? And perhaps the most powerful question you could ask is, what is the system asking people to ignore in order for it to function? Every system has a blind spot, and those blind spots are what we are here to have a look at and find as internal auditors, because that's where the risk lives, and that's what we want to know. So the auditor is a systems thinker and a systems builder. So where does this leave us? Internal auditing, I believe, is evolving. It's evolving with new standards that are occurring, with world events, with so many external influences being put upon us. We have to evolve, not away from compliance, with it and beyond it, because compliance alone tells us if a system is aligned to a certain set of rules. We all know that. But systems thinking, if we really want to improve, tells us if a system is capable of performance today and doing what we want it to do today, and also into the future. Is it still capable of performance? And those two things, is it aligned to rules and is it capable of performance, are not the same things. We need to have two separate ways of thinking. So here's what I've learned after many years across industries, different boardrooms, talking to different people from different backgrounds. Most organizations don't suffer from a lack of information. There's a lot of information being thrown at us now from all angles. We have information derived from AI, we have information derived from books and media, and information from the many meetings that we wish were emails. So what I've learned is that they don't suffer from a lack of information. It's the interpretation of that information. It requires someone to have a lot of courage to be able to say, you know what, I'm seeing a pattern here. This is a system outcome. This is not a one-off. This is not an isolated issue. And here is what I think it's telling us. Now, you could be completely wrong with your summary of what I think it's telling us, but you have to have the courage to start, raise the issue and say, you know, I'm seeing a pattern. And if we want improvement, real improvement, we have to stop protecting the mediocrity. So next, keep an ear out, and the next time you hear it, which I know you will, phrases like, but this is how it's always been done. This is good enough for now. Or this is not my area, it's not my job. Because systems don't improve by accident. They improve when someone decides that's not good enough. And when they say that, they're saying this is no longer acceptable. And as someone that more often than not is an internal auditor, I'll leave this with you. The modern internal auditor is not an inspector of compliance. They need to be able to translate systems. And the question that defines their role in their work is no longer just, is this compliant? Yes or no. But what is this system teaching us about itself? What is it telling me? What can I learn from this? Because if we want to see clearly, we have to start thinking about the systems and thinking critically before we can start improving anything. Thank you again to Mike and to the team at Exemplar Global for asking me to join and talk about the differences between an investigative auditor and a critical thinker for this season of Expo 2026.
Well, Well, thank you again, Kelly Rusbatch, for that expert look at how internal auditors can work strategically as systems thinkers. If those of you who are watching this pre-recorded session have questions you'd like to address to Kelly, just write us at info@exemplarglobal.org, and we'll be sure to get your questions over to her. You can also join our exclusive Expo community here at the Exemplar Global community, and there you can interact with your fellow attendees or our speakers and ask questions there. Before we close the session, we want to remind you to check out all the other sessions we have available for you here at the Expo, and be sure to claim your CPD for that session as well as this one. So thanks again, Kelly. Thank you all for being there, and we'll see you at the next session here at the Exemplar Global Expo. So long.